Welcome to Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and Sean and special returning guest Garrett. We are picking up where we left off on Garrett's C4 rear bumper install on his 5th gen 4runner. The first video we showed you how to get the OEM Toyota bumper off, and we got the main C4 bumper on his rig. Now in this video we're going to show you how to get the swing arms on, whether you have a single or a dual swing out. Garrett has a dual swing out. And then we're going to show you how to get all the associated hardware on there. And it's going to depend on what you order from C4. For this video, Garrett bought the jerry can holder, high lift jack holder, and he has the spare tire carrier. So on his driver's side swing out, we're going to be showing you how to get the jerry can holder and the high lift jack holder onto that side. On the passenger side swing out, we're going to show you how to get the spare tire holder on there. We're also going to show you how to get a tray table installed. That's another optional thing, and Garrett chose that option, and we're going to put that on the inside of the passenger side swing out. We're also going to show you how to swap out the trailer hitch bracket for one that C4 provides in this kit, and this bracket puts the trailer hitch wiring up higher, tucked up in that area above the rear bumper, so it's less likely to be hit by anything while you're four-wheeling. To finish up the job, we're going to show you how to wire power to your license plate light by tapping into the trailer hitch wiring. This is a fairly involved job to do. There's a lot of little parts, a lot of fasteners, a lot of things you have to get done to get all these parts onto the bumper. If I were you, I would set aside a full day and get a friend to help you to get all this done. As a reference to get the swing arms onto the bumper and all the associated parts onto the swing arms, we did use a PDF file that C4 provides, and then we did use their install video, which gave us some further information. We'll put links to both of those in the video description so you can have those as a reference as well. With all that said, let's get started with this job. So the first thing we're going to work on is getting the swing arm ready to go on the bumper. On the top and the bottom, we're going to have this metal sleeve that slides into the bearing, and each of these go in both sides of the arm. Following that, on the outsides of both sides of the arm is a seal. Instructions from C4 doesn't say anything about lubricating these with grease, but common sense tells us that, hey, it's a bearing going to be riding on a surface. Let's put some grease on it. I'm just going to use a multi-purpose grease called Red Devil. So I'm just going to grease the shaft here a little bit. And then I'm also gonna grease the bearing itself. So I'm just gonna get a lot of grease on this shaft, and then I'm gonna grease the bearing really good. And I'm gonna do the same with both sides. If you chose a route like Garrett did, getting these things powder coated, depending on your powder coater, they might not have protected the inner bore very well, and you might have some over spray for the painting or the powder coating. So you either get in here with like a brass brush, or maybe some emery cloth, or maybe a wire wheel, and you just clean it up really well, any of the excessive paint, so it's ready for the bearing and it's ready for the seal. So these are nice and clean. I just touched them up with a brass brush, and now I'm also gonna get grease on the inside of this race that the bearing seats against. I kind of subscribe that you really can't use too much grease. I guess for some applications you can, but I'm gonna load this up with lots of grease, so this is gonna swing really smooth for the life of this truck. I'm also gonna put a little grease on this surface that the seal rides on. And then I'm just gonna insert the seal onto this collar. It's gonna go with this side facing the swing arm and this side facing outward. So I'm just gonna slide it on with my fingers, and I'm just gonna leave it like that, and I'm gonna do the same with the other side. So now we have our two pre-assembled halves, the sleeve, the bearing, and the seal. I'm gonna slide them into the swing arm, Now it's up to you how you go about this. Gravity really isn't our friend right now with the swing arm facing this direction. It would be ideal if you could prop it up and get the seals driven in, but I'm gonna see if I can do this as is. I'm just gonna use my hand to try to push this in a little bit and get it started. Maybe easier said than done. I'm gonna take a plastic hammer and tap on it. I'm gonna tap on the high side and see if I can get it started in there. Nope. So I tried to knock them in with the arm sitting flat on the ground, but it really wasn't working out very well. We now have it standed up on end. I chose a socket to use to drive the seal in. It's a 36mm impact socket, and it fits the outer diameter of the seal really well. So I'm gonna place it on top. The key is try to get the seal in as square as possible at the beginning. Equal gap. Wherever you notice, wherever your highest side is, that's the side you want to start getting in first. I see that this side is a little high, so I'm going to try to tap on this edge of the socket and try to get it driven in a little bit on that edge. I see now that it's getting started. I think we're going to be good to go driving it in the rest of the way. The instructions say you want to drive the seal in just a little bit recessed, not driven in as far as you can drive it. So I'm going to keep on driving till the top of the seal is just a little bit recessed in relation to the arm. You might want to lift up and just eyeball and to take a look at how everything's looking. Looks like I got to drive in a little bit further. Just nice, easy taps. That's about flush. I'm just going to go in just a little bit more. And I'm going to call that good. It's just barely recessed, maybe by like a 0.5 millimeter. And now we're going to do the same with the other side. So for the other side, to get it up on end, we're using a 4x6 block of wood. You have this protrusion on one of the swing arms that we have to make up the gap for. We'll have a solid platform to get the other bearing and seal driven in. Depending on if you got the single or dual swing out option, you might have to support it with some type of thing like this block of wood so you can get the other bearing and seal driven in. Now we understand that not everybody's gonna have a 36mm impact socket in their tool arsenal. You can use a piece of pipe that fits the diameter of the seal really well, or maybe you just take a brass drift and you just lightly tap it around the circumference of the seal, slowly driving it in. So there's more than one way to get this done. Since I have these big sockets, that was the option that I chose. So now we have both seals and the bearings installed into the arm. So now we want to get the swing arm attached to the bumper. If you use the powder coater or you painted it yourself, we're noticing that because the paint took up a little bit of the diameter of the bracket on the bumper, we're gonna just use my little Dremel tool with the wire wheel to clean up the excess paint. Now let's see if this fits in a little easier. Yeah, a little bit, maybe a little bit more. Yep, that's better. So we're just gonna test fit this and see how the threads are feeling. A little tight, but I think we can get it done. So before we struggle with the swing arm and get it in place, we're just making sure that this bolt is gonna thread into the threads, because it was just a little bit rusty looking from the bumper sitting outside. It's threading in fine. So now we're gonna take the bolt out and we're gonna get the swing arm in place. So I'm a big fan of using grease on fasteners. I'm just gonna pre-apply some of that same red grease on the threads of this bolt. And I'm gonna put a little bit on the inside of the threads on the bumper too. This is just gonna make it easier if we ever have to take the swing arm off, and it's just gonna help inhibit any corrosion building up in there with the grease. You could use anti-seize too. Anti-seize would be another good option. So Garrett's grabbing the swing arm. For his particular application, the swing arm we were working on is the driver's side one. So Garrett's bringing the swing arm into the bracket onto the bumper. You just want to keep this thing nice and square, so pick it up a little bit. There you go. And it should slide in fairly easily. You're a little too high. There you go. Bring the bottom down again, right there. Working on getting the bolt hole aligned so we could slide the bolt in. So we got it through the top sleeve, and now we have to find the alignment with the bottom sleeve. So wiggle it, pull it up a little bit, Garrett. So it helps to actually be looking how the arm is in relation to the bracket. You can see that it's square. So having somebody down here where I'm at and Garrett on the swing arm, I can direct them how much to tilt it. So now it looks like it's lined up pretty good. I'm just going to take my plastic hammer and see if I could tap this in place. It looks like it's now hitting the threads, and now I'm just going to carefully try to turn the bolt and get it started in the threads. Another thing you could do is get underneath the bumper and look through the threaded nut and see that the bolt is basically right at the top of the threads. When you first try to get the bolt started in the threads, don't get overzealous with your ratchet. Choke up on the wrench and just give it some nice short turns, and if you start to feel any resistance, that means that maybe it's not going in square, and back off and try again. You just don't want to cross thread it. I don't know if it would be even possible to cross thread it the way this arm goes into the bracket. Pretty much the bolt is going to go in straight regardless, but just a word of caution, if you feel it hanging up, stop and reset. You don't want to cross thread the threads. We have the bolt started in the threads, and we're tightening it with a 1/2 inch drive ratchet with a 1 1/8 inch socket. Okay, so how tight do you get this? The directions say you want just a little bit of resistance. You don't want it to be able to swing super freely, but you don't want it to have total easy movement. So Garrett's just kind of lightly tossing it and figuring like, okay, this is about right. Later on, if you find that it's a little bit too tight or it's a little bit too loose, because this is going to have struts on it that are going to control the opening and the closing of the swing arm, you could obviously just get on here with your socket and loosen it or tighten it to dial it in better. Now that we got the arm onto the bumper, we're going to install these slide protector plates. The locking pin screws into here, and it's going to be riding on this surface, and the purpose of this plate is just to basically protect your bumper from the pin gouging into it and rubbing off your paint. It's held on by 2 small bolts and nylon lock nut. The bolt's going to come in from the top, and the nylon lock nut is going to go in on the bottom. Okay, we got this one started, and then to get this other one started on the opposite end, we're going to have to open up the swing arm. And then now Garrett could access the inside one. This one's fighting Garrett a little bit, so we're utilizing a brass drift and a hammer to just tap this bolt in. There we go, a little bit of persuasion. Now he's just going to get the nylon lock nut on the bottom of that bolt. Garrett has got a 1/8 inch Allen head socket with a medium length 1/4 inch extension with a 1/4 inch ratchet. On the bottom, he's using a 3/8 inch box end wrench on the nut, and he's going to cinch up these fasteners. There's no torque spec for this. He's just going to snug them up nice and tight. So for this one on this side, a regular ratchet, the head of it's going to be too big, and we're not going to be able to get on straight with the Allen head socket. So you could either use a conventional 1/8 inch Allen wrench, or you can use, basically you can call it like a little mini breaker bar for a 1/4 inch drive. This has a much slimmer profile, and it will fit into where we can get a straight shot on the head of the Allen bolt. Garrett is just going to hold that steady for me, and I'm going to tighten it from below with the 3/8 drive open end wrench. Okay, that's tight. So next we're going to get the locking pin installed into the swing arm. The directions say to grease it up. I'm going to grease the spring area here. And then I'm going to grease the threads also. Again, if you got it powder coated, you might find that there's some excessive paint in here. So we just use our little Dremel wire wheel, worked it through there to remove some of the excess paint so we can get this thing started in easier. I'm also gonna put some grease on the threads. And now we're gonna drop the pin in and get the thread started. They recommend to get this started with the gate closed, which we do have it closed. The nut on this pin wants to hang up on the arm just a little bit to get the thread started. So you might find that. We've got it started. Now we're gonna use a 7/8 open end wrench to tighten it up. If you didn't have one, you could use a crescent wrench, obviously. You just wanna go easy at first, and if you find that it's hanging up, you might be cross-threading it, so stop and try again. Okay, it's bottomed out. And now I'm just gonna cinch this up, have somebody hold the swing arm for you, or you lean against it yourself. And I'm just getting this nice and snug. You don't have to really crank on this thing. You just want it tight enough to where it's not gonna work itself loose and fall out on the trail on you. So now that's snugged up nice. And now we're done installing the driver's side swing arm on Garrett's bumper. So here's the passenger side swing out. We didn't show the installation because it was the same procedure to get the bearings and seals into the arm and then to get the arm onto the bumper. Exact same procedure. So this is what the passenger side swing out would look like if you have a dual swing out. Here's the inside and here's what the outside looks like. So here's something helpful to share with you. These hardware bags are filled with a lot of fasteners, and so what Garrett and I did is we grouped them into like fasteners. So we got all these like fasteners in their little groups, so we're not just digging into a bundle of fasteners. We have all the individual sizes grouped together. We're going to get this square plate onto the driver's side swing out. This came as bare metal and we shot it with some black paint. This plate is going to be affixed to the swing out with these short button head bolts, and then we're going to screw the button head bolts into these plastic bump stops on the inside, because these plastic bump stops are what are going to rest against the main body of the bumper when you close the swing out. So Garrett's going to get the plate right up against here, and he's going to put one of the button head bolts in from the back side, and then on the inside of the swing arm he's going to screw in the plastic bumper, and he's going to do the same with the other three. To tighten up these button head bolts, Garrett's going to use a 5/32 Allen head socket and a 1/4 inch drive ratchet. He's just going to hold the bumper on the back side, cinch it up snug, and call it good. They don't have to be cranked on very tight. All right, we're going to get the struts connected now. The way it connects is the body goes on the arm and the rod hooks up to the bumper. So you come in from the bottom and then you slide it in from the top on the bumper side. The kit came with 2 nylon lock nuts and 2 regular nuts. Garrett and I pretty much think that the person who packaged the kit probably made a mistake, because why not make them all nylon lock nuts instead of one being a lock nut and one being a regular nut? So whatever. If this happens to you, you obviously just could go to the hardware store and replace this with a nylon lock nut if you got regular nuts too in your kit. So we slide it in there. We use a flat washer, and then since we have a choice of where we put the nylon lock nut and where the regular nut, we're going to put the regular nut on this side, because due to gravity it's going to be maybe a little less likely to come off as opposed to this one that's facing downward. We have the arm opened all the way. With the last pinhole, you can see that it cants the bolt a little bit. I'm releasing the pin and opening it up a little bit more, and then now that lets me get the stud pointing straight down and not canted a little bit. So I'll come in with the flat washer and the nylon lock nut and get this one started. And then now we need to tighten these up. So to tighten up the struts, I'm going to use a 1/2 inch open end wrench. So you have to hold the stud, and a 1/2 inch open end wrench fits. Come in at this angle because the pin for the strut gets in the way. So come in kind of directly in line with the strut, and then I'm going to use a little shorty ratchet with a 1/2 inch socket to tighten it up. And then you do the same with the other one. Okay, the strut is now firmly attached to the bumper and to the swing arm. Okay, let's show you how the strut works now. So we're gonna unlock it, and then we're gonna swing it open. Look, Ma, no hands. Now you'll notice it kind of opened up with quite a bit of force, and that's because we don't have any weight on it yet. So as soon as you put your jerry cans or your spare tire or your high lift jack or whatever, the kitchen sink, the arm is not going to open up with so much force. It's going to be a more controlled opening because of the extra weight. And we got the strut on the passenger side swing arm. Same procedure. The body of the shock goes towards the arm, coming up from the bottom, and then it comes in through the top on the bumper side. Let's see how this one works. Pretty magical. We're now going to get this little striker plate installed on the driver's side swing out. You see what it looks like? It goes in with this fashion with the tail facing the inside of the swing out. And he's going to come in with a button head bolt on the top and then a flat washer and a nylon lock nut underneath. These button head bolts have an 1/8 inch Allen head, and then the nut is a 3/8 inch. So he's going to use a box end 3/8 on the bottom, and he's going to tighten up from the top with the Allen head socket. We're now going to get this locking mechanism onto the passenger side swing arm. We're going to come in from the back side with a 3/4 inch long button head bolt, and then similar to the other side, the button head bolts are going to screw into the plastic bump stop. Capture the bump stop and then just screw it on. And they're going to do the same with the other 3 fasteners. To tighten these up, I'm using my 1/4 inch ratchet, a little short 1/4 inch extension, and a 5/32 Allen head socket. So I noticed that it's kind of hard to get the button head bolt tight enough because I can't hold the plastic bump stop strong enough with my fingers. I'm going to protect the bump stop with a rag, and then I'm going to grab a hold of it with a channel locks and see if I can hold it tight. Yeah, that's working out pretty good. I'm able to hold onto it and get the button head bolt tighter. So for this bottom locking mechanism, you can slide this mechanism side to side. You see where the mechanism has a little bend to the metal. We want to get that bend closer towards the driver's side. We're going to loosen these bolts and try to slide the mechanism further towards the driver's side to where this locking mechanism captures this part of the bumper a little bit better. So you can see now how it's grabbing a lot more after we shifted it over this way. So you just have to play around with it. You can see how much it's contacting the bumper now. It's a lot more of a positive connection. So here's how this locking mechanism works that we just got connected to the passenger side swing arm. You come in, it hooks this hook right here on the bumper and then locks it in nice and firm. And then when you open it up, you have to open this up first, and then you open the pin, and then you can slide it open. So just like that. So next, we're gonna get these little rubber bump stops attached to the passenger side swing arm. They're gonna go right here. One here, and then one on the bottom. So you take these 3/4 inch Phillips head screws and you push them in this side. So you can see it has a recessed side. You slide it in there. It's a little bit of a tight fit. and then you grab your screwdriver, Phillips head, and you push it in, and you can see how much of the stud is sticking out the backside. So we come in with the bump stop on the inside, and then on the backside we're going to put a little flat washer and a nylon lock nut. And we're going to do the same for the other three. So we're going to use a Phillips head screwdriver and a 3/8 box end wrench to tighten these up. We're going to come in from this side with the Phillips head screwdriver, and then on the back side we're going to use our 3/8 box end wrench. You're going to notice that you could easily over tighten these things, so as you tighten them up you're going to see the bump stops start to deform and get wider here. So we're just basically tighten them up to where they all look about even, and we're stopping because we could see that you could just keep on screwing and tighten this thing up to where it really flattens out, and I don't think you want that. Now we're going to assemble the second locking mechanism. It's got this rod. You slide it in to the locking mechanism. So now you get your U-bolt. You have a nylon lock nut and a regular nut. You want to slide the regular nut on first on each part of the U-bolt. So we got the regular nuts screwed onto the U-bolt. Doesn't matter at this point where you get them in. You just want to get them on first. Now you slide them into the pin. And then we're going to get our nylon lock nuts on the other side. Now the way this goes onto the bumper is it affixes right here. We're going to come in with some button head bolts on the front side and then a washer and a nut on the back side. It also comes with this little doohickey, and what this is, it allows you with your thumb to basically hit it and flip up the mechanism. Since Garrett's right-handed, I'm going to put this on the right-hand side. I'm going to take the nylon lock nut off. I'm going to put this on like so, and then I'm going to put the nylon lock nut back on. So now you can see it works like a little lever. So we're going to use these little shorty button head bolts, a flat washer, and then a nylon lock nut. We're going to come in the front side with a button head bolt. On the back side we're going to get our flat washer and then a nylon lock nut, and we're going to do the same for the other three. To tighten these up, I'm going to use an 1/8 inch Allen head socket, a medium length 1/4 inch extension and my 1/4 inch ratchet, and then a 3/8 box end wrench for the nut. There seems to be a little bit of play in the bolt holes, so you just want to get it as square as possible. So I'm eyeballing it, making sure that it's fitting fairly square on the swing arm. So we're now ready to adjust the U-bolt. I'm utilizing a 10mm deep socket, short 3/8 extension on my little shorty ratchet. And what you have to do is you tighten up the nylon lock nuts on the back side, and you get it to where when you engage the U-bolt onto the locking hooks on the swing arm, it compresses this passenger side swing arm into the driver's side swing arm, and you see that those rubber bumpers are now nicely contacting the driver's side swing arm. So as I start to close this, you'll see that they compressed a little bit, all three of them. We have a very solid connection of the two swing arms together, so that's the purpose of this upper locking mechanism, to bring the two swing arms securely together so there's no rattling of parts. One thing to look at is how much thread is sticking out behind both nylon lock nuts. This side with the little mechanism isn't going to have as many threads sticking out because you have to make room for this mechanism. You just eyeball it, get it as square as possible, and then now what we have to do to lock everything in place, we're going to tighten up these little nuts on the inside to tighten up the U-bolt securely to the rod. We're going to tighten up those inner nuts with a 10mm open end wrench. So you just cinch them up snug. We noticed that we didn't have this little thumb thing on right. We had it downward. You want to flip it upward like this, so when you release it, you have it up on the upper side, and then you work it like that. So it's supposed to go on the top side. Now we're going to get the spare tire carrier onto the passenger side swing arm. If you look, it goes more towards the outside than the inside. So we're using the fasteners all the way to the edge here. We're using these carriage bolts and flange nuts on the back side. So he's going to come in from the front with the carriage bolt, and on the back side he's getting the flange nut. And we're going to do the same for the rest of the fasteners. There's 6 in total. Okay, so you can now see that we have all 6 fasteners connected. One on the top right, bottom right, center, bottom. One on the inside here, bottom left, top left. We're gonna use a 9/16 socket, short extension, and a 1/2" drive ratchet. We could tighten up the 3 bottom ones with a socket. It doesn't look like we have access with a socket on the top ones, so we'll have to use a box end wrench on those. Get them tight, 9/16. Now we're gonna get the camp table connected to the passenger side swing arm. This is the side that faces up. So when you rotate the table down, you have this as your working surface. We could set it here and hook it on this stud right here for right now. This will kind of hold it for us. So for this right side connection for the camp table, we're going to use this long bolt with the washer and this thick plastic bushing. We put the bushing in between the swing arm and the camp table. We come in with the bolt with the washer underneath the head, and we slide it through. On the back side, we put another flat washer, and then we're gonna put a flange nut on. For the other side, we're gonna use this bolt, a little bit shorter, and we're gonna use a skinny plastic washer. So we gotta fit the skinny washer in there. We were having a hard time getting this skinny plastic washer in between the camp table and the swing arm. So what we did is we tightened this one up first a little bit. It's a 1/2" bolt head and then a 1/2" nut. Just cinched it up a little bit. And then now we have more of a gap on this side to get the washer in. It slides in really easy now. And now we just gotta get our other bolt in. You get the washer aligned, you come in with your bolt and washer from the outside coming in. You get another flat washer on, and then you get another flange nut. You might have a different style nut. Maybe you get a nylon lock nut with your kit. This one we're not going to be able to get a socket in, so we're just going to have to use 2 box end wrenches to tighten this up. So now we're going to get some little bump stops connected to the passenger side swing arm for the tray table. So it's these ones right here and a short Phillips head screw. So you have to insert it into the rubber bump stop, and then again, just like the other ones we did, you have to push in and get it where the screw is sticking out the other side. And then utilizing your Phillips head screwdriver, you're going to get one attached here and then one here. We already got this one screwed in. So if you got it powder coated, these threads might be filled with paint, so you might have a little bit of a difficult time getting them started, but just use a bit of pressure pushing in and you'll get it started. Both bump stops are connected. When the tray table comes up, it rests against the bump stops, and then to secure it in place, you use this little plastic wing nut. Now that we have the tray table attached at the lower hinge, we need to get our cables in place so when we open up the tray table, it locks down at a 90 degrees so you can use your tray table for whatever you're doing, cooking your breakfast or making coffee. So with this side of the tray table, you want the cable going in on the inside, because if you put it on this side, it's going to hit this bracket and not be able to swing as freely. I have one of these short 7/16 head bolts with a flat washer. I'm going to come in from the outside, and then I'm going to have the cable in this fashion where this side is going to be facing the bumper. Come in with a flat washer and then a nylon lock nut. And the reason for the nylon lock nut is we can't get this thing all the way tight because we want the cable to be able to swing freely as we open it up and we close it. So we want the cable to be able to rotate. When we get this nut on here, we're not going to tighten it all the way to take all the play out of this. We're just going to leave it a little loose so it could swivel. So now we're going to get the bottom connection done, and the directions say that you want to twist it in such a way to where when it collapses, it's going to collapse and not really spring out. So it's a little bit of a trial and error to figuring out which way to do it. So we'll try it this way for now. So same thing, we're going to come in with a bolt and a washer from the outside, slide it in, and then we're going to put a washer and another nylon lock nut on this side. Now we're going to get the opposite side on. Same thing, we're going to have this side facing the framework of the swing arm. Come in with a bolt and a washer on the outside, capture the cable, and then slide it through, and same thing, another washer and a nylon lock nut. And then same thing on the bottom. Come in with the bolt and washer, capture the end of the cable, slide it through, and then we'll put another washer and nylon lock nut on the inside. The bolt head and the nut are both the 7/16. I'm just going to get on the nut with a box end 7/16 and then get on the head of the bolt with the 7/16 socket and cinch these up. And this is basically what you want. You've taken most of the slack out, but there's still the ability of the cable to rotate. A good technique to get the right tightness but not too tight is just go ahead and tighten it all the way up to where it firms up, and then just back it off like a quarter turn, half a turn, and that's all you need. Now you can see that you've taken almost all the slack out, but it's just a little bit loose to allow for it to swivel. Once you have all the fasteners connected for the cables, go ahead and test it to see if the cables are working like you want them to. So as you lift this up, they should collapse inward, and then see these little doohickeys right here? These obviously are meant to grab the cable and kind of keep them tucked in so they don't jut out. So as you see, as I rotate this up, the cable is getting captured by this little tab that they welded on and keeping the cables in. It should be like that. Maybe the cable has a little bit of tension on it. It should end up kind of like that, to where it's tucked in, it's not splaying out like that. So you can play around with this, maybe try twisting the cable the other direction to where it's going to close nicely with this tab capturing the cable on both sides. We're now going to get our license plate holder plate in place on the spare tire carrier like so, and then we're going to get the spare tire on. And then another bracket is going to attach to this bracket that's going to be the bracket that's holding the license plate. So now we're ready to get the spare tire up onto the tire carrier. Spare tires can be pretty heavy, especially if you have big tires. Don't hurt your back and lean over and use bad body mechanics. Either hinge at the waist and pick it up. One technique that I like to use is a little momentum and use my leg to help. So I'll pick it up and I'm going to kick it with my right thigh and then rotate it into my arms like that. Then figure out how you want it to look on the back of your rig. Maybe an emblem pointing up. Slide it in place. It has 3 lug nuts that you can put on to secure it to the tire carrier. One thing that might be a good thing to do is get at least one locking one. This spare tire is now very easily accessible for any thieves. If all a thief has to do is roll up and take off a few lug nuts and get a nice spare tire and a rim, they might do it. Garrett has these rims that have their own specific type of lug key. It's kind of like a multi-slotted special adapter. So this would actually make it a little harder for your average criminal, that they just can't take a regular lug nut wrench and spin it off. And now we're just going to spin these on and snug them up. Okay, now we have the spare tire firmly attached to the swing arm, and now we're going to get the other bracket in place that's going to hold the license plate. This is where your license plate light would bolt up, and we'll show you how to wire that a little later on. We're going to come in with these carriage bolts from this side and then go through this bracket and this bracket too. Then we're just going to put a flat washer and a flange nut on the left side. And then we're just going to do the same thing and get the other one started. So these flange nuts are 9/16. I'm just going to use my 1/2 inch drive with a 9/16 socket and tighten these up. Okay, those are both cinched up snug. So to get the license plate on, we're using these little Allen head bolts. They have a 5/32 head. We just come in from the front with the bolt, no washer. And then on the back, we're going to put a washer and a nut, and this nut is a 7/16 head. So to get them tight, I'm going to use my 1/4 inch ratchet with the 5/32 Allen head socket, and then a box end 7/16 on the back side. Okay, we have our license plate firmly attached to the license plate holder. We've got the jerry can holder on and the high lift jack holder on. We had to do some Jenga here and move things around to figure out how everything is going to work together, because we not only have to think about the jerry can holder and the high lift jack holder, but we have to make sure that we have room for the backup camera that's going to go here. So at first we were going to have the jerry can holder over further to the right, but that pushes the high lift jack holder over more. And then as you can see, if this goes over one more spot to here, this part of the holder will be blocking the camera. So what we did is we're utilizing the rightmost holes and the center holes to mount it as far left as we can, and we got it up at this height. So we're not utilizing the very top holes, we're utilizing the middle and the bottom holes. You come in with a carriage bolt on the front, and then on the back side you utilize a flat washer, and then the kit had some mixed fasteners, but they're all the correct size, just different style. So this is a regular nut and this is a flange nut. So we're utilizing these four for the jerry can holder. We're doing the same thing with the high lift jack, coming in from the front with a carriage bolt, and again a flat washer and a flange nut on the back side. So through process of elimination, with this combo, with you choosing to go with a jerry can holder rather than a Rotopax or other type of holder, Max Trax holder, we pretty much think that this is the only orientation that we have available to get all these components on and working with the jerry can holder, high lift jack holder, and then have room to get the backup camera in place. So depending on your application, if you have the jerry can like Garrett has with the high lift jack combo, or maybe you have Rotopax carrier or Max Trax carrier, all of the nuts that attach these carriage bolts to the swing arm are 9/16 nut. You go on the back side. I'm just using a short 1/2 inch drive ratchet with a short extension and a 9/16 short socket, and I'm tightening up all the ones I can get to. These ones on the top, because of the way the bumper's made, you can't get in here straight with a socket, so I'm just going to use a box end wrench or open end side to cinch these up. I'm just going to get these all nice and tight and call it good. No torque spec. Okay, and then I'm going to use my box end wrench. Okay, all of the fasteners that attach the jerry can holder and the high lift jack are now tight. The kit comes with these little protector plates on the driver's side swing arm. You're going to put this protector plate, and then when the other arm comes in contact with the two bumpers, this is where the two bumpers are going to rest against. One of the things that Garrett and I are finding with this install is that there's choices you have to make with the fasteners, and because this kit has so many fasteners, you might find that you might have chose the wrong fasteners for one application, and then afterwards realize, oh, I should have used those bolts and nuts for this, and then swap them. So we're getting this short button head bolt into the plate, and then when it goes into here, it feels a little bit tight, and we don't know if that's from the powder coating, but if I just grab my 5/32 Allen head, I can just easily thread this in. So it's not ideal. It should slide in easy, but we think the powder coating is what's holding us up. I'm just spinning this bolt into place. Now these plates came bare metal, so Garrett actually rattle canned these with a black paint. It's a chassis roll bar paint. Then we're going to get the other one started. It looks like the same deal. It's gonna have to be kind of threaded in place. On the back side, we're gonna put a flat washer and a regular nut. And then we're gonna get the other one. Washer, then nut. I'm gonna use a 5/32 Allen head on the front and then a 7/16 box end wrench on the back side. So now when we close the passenger side swing arm, these bumpers are going to contact the plate right here. You pull this one in, you'll see the bumpers actually contact the plate. So we have another little plate, and this is another plate that a bumper goes up against. Right here on the driver's side swing out, right above where the backup camera goes, there's two holes right here, and that's where this plate goes. So we're finding the same thing. We're utilizing these two small button head bolts. They don't slide in very easily, but if I thread them in with my 5/32 Allen head wrench with a 1/4 inch drive ratchet, it goes in pretty easily. And then we do the same with the other one. Get it placed in there and then just thread it in. On the back side, same thing. Flat washer first and then a regular nut. 5/32 Allen head on the front, 7/16 box end on the back. Okay. And this one is a striker plate for this bump stop right here, right below the upper locking mechanism. So the kit comes with another bracket for the trailer hitch wiring that's meant to get it up a little bit higher and away from hitting anything while you're off-roading. We have to get it unclipped from this original bracket, so it has these metal tabs. You could push in, get one side started, and then push in from the other side, and then you can feed it out. You have a couple choices to getting it out of this bracket. You can try here. We tried but failed miserably. We couldn't get this one unconnected, but these two upper ones were a lot easier. You just push the tab here, pull back, and then this one, push the tab and pull back also. So now we can feed this out and then get this bracket off. And it looks like it's held on with two 12mm bolts. So I'm just using a Ratchet 12mm socket and a short extension. I'm going to transition to my Milwaukee and zip these out. This tucks it up a lot higher and out of the way. Just get our bolts started again. Okay, those are cinched up. We actually undid this little plastic mesh. It was originally, the wires were tucked up and it was taped onto here. We did this because we're going to be tapping into these wires to run Garrett's license plate light. So we noticed when we had this hooked up, this piece right here is in the way, and it would have been nice to know that this was going to get in the way before we put the bumper on, because one of the bolts that takes this off is right here and the bumper's in the way, and the bolts are fairly long. So we're thinking that we can, after removing these two top ones, we're just going to fatigue the metal and bust this thing off. And it's full of dirt. And I just kept on wiggling this up and down, and finally broke off the metal. That bolt is just going to live there. So now, if we get this bracket in place, the trailer hitch connection is tucked up nicely. It's not hanging low that it could hit any obstructions as he's four-wheeling. And then now we can open up both hatches. We're noticing that the clips don't hold it in very well on this new clamp, so I just tweaked them out a little bit with the screwdriver. Let's see if it'll hold in a little better. So after bending these silver tabs out a little bit, now it's got a much more firm grip on this bracket. So we're going to connect up our wires again, and then these plug back into the frame right here. There's a good chance that these plugs got damaged, so if it's really bad, you can maybe grab a zip tie and go around the whole frame and capture it, but they seem to be holding okay. Now that we have the trailer hitch wiring relocated, we're going to tap into the trailer hitch wiring to run power to the license plate light. So we did a little research online and we used the test light, and we figured out that the white is the ground, the green is the power to the tail lights. What we have to do is splice into here, use butt connectors, and run 2 wires off of one side, and one of those wires is going to go to the license plate light, and then the other side is going to go back in here. So if we snip here and then we snip this one, we're going to strip the wires, put a butt connector on this side, and then on this side we're going to stick in an additional wire to each one of those, and those are going to run to the license plate light. So here's our setup so far. When you combine wires, you have to choose a butt connector that will be big enough for it to fit into the butt connector. I'm using a size 10 to 12 gauge butt connector. This green wire on the trailer hitch wiring is a 14 gauge, and the wiring that I'm going to use to run to the license plate light is 16 gauge. I got the 2 ends together, I twisted them, I stuck it into the butt connector, and I crimped it. When you have a bigger size butt connector than the wiring you have, then what you have to do for this side, because this is a 14 going into a 10 to 12 size butt connector, so I'm gonna fold it over to make it a little bit thicker, and then I'm gonna stick it into the butt connector and then crimp it down. So we have both of the connections made. On this side, the shrink butt connectors are gonna get a nice seal because it's just a single wire. But when you look at these, the butt connectors aren't really meant to shrink very well around 2 wires. So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap these with some electrical tape just for a little extra insurance to keep any moisture and debris out. So now we have the connectors just protected a little better with some electrical tape. Now we have to run these wires towards the passenger side swing out. We're just going to follow pretty much the straightest path, run it along the bottom side of the bumper and towards the passenger side. So after butt splicing the wires that are going to run to the license plate light, we put some split wire loom, and then we stretched it over the top of the connectors, and this split wire loom isn't big enough to capture those butt connectors. We just went over it with some electrical tape to protect that area better. Then we ran the wiring towards the passenger side and zip tied it to these hooks that we bent down with a big hammer. So zip ties here, we put another couple zip ties here, and then we went over the passenger side frame rail and then went out towards the bumper. So then it goes right through here. I zip tied it right there, and then it goes upward and it goes towards the passenger side swing out. It comes along here. We used a big zip tie right here. There's a tab here. We zip tied it there. We zip tied it there. We ran it through this tab here. We ran it behind this little bracket here. We zip tied it here. Zip tied it here. We went through another hole in the bracket, and then we went through this actual carriage bolt hole towards the license plate. So then right through here, that's where that carriage bolt hole is. Zip tied it here. What we did here is we put in a connector so we can easily disconnect it. This license plate light is in the way when you want to take your spare tire off. You'll first have to take this off with a 9/16 box end wrench or whatever you have, a socket, and you have to pull this off so you can get your spare tire off. So you need some way to disconnect this easily so you can pull this whole thing off. So that's why we wired in a quick disconnect. We did shrink butt connectors for our wires. So if you remember, the white was the ground, the black was the hot. We connected the black to the red on the connector, and then we hooked up the white to the black. For the light, the black is the ground and the red is the hot. We butt spliced in the connector, keeping the same color arrangement. Black, ground, red, hot. So let's visit pretend land right now. Let's pretend the tire's on here and we first have to get this off. So you get in here with a 9/16 socket or a box end wrench and you get these loose. But before you take it off all the way, you're going to want to undo your quick disconnect. So you go underneath here, you undo it, and then now when you pull this off, you have your plate with your light and your electrical connector. So that's why we put this in. Okay, moment of truth. Did we do it right? Turn on the lights. Hey, look at that. Let there be light. And there was light. All right, this is the final result of all our work installing this C4 bumper on a 5th gen 4runner. We have the passenger side. You can see what it looks like down below. It's got the cool C4 logo. You've got the bottom locking mechanism and then the top locking mechanism. On the passenger side swing out, he has his spare tire with his license plate. On the driver's side swing out, he has the high lift jack mount. You can see how the high lift jack affixes to the bracket. You have a carriage bolt that goes through there, and then you have a wing nut, and Garrett just chose to put a bunch of washers here as spacers. And then on the bottom, the kit does come with a wing nut, but because of the high lift jack model he chose, it has these welded on plates, and so there's not really any room to get a wing nut, so he just used a regular nut in this position and tightened it up with the box end wrench. He's got a dual jerry can holder, and he's got some nice olive green or army green jerry cans. This is actually a base plate that helps spread out the footprint for the high lift jack. So if you were in soft ground like sand or mud, you put the high lift jack on top of this and it spreads out the weight so it doesn't sink down into the ground. You can see the type of fixing mechanism they use for the jerry cans. It's a strapping mechanism. You can see the driver's side. So here's how you would open up the swing arms to get access to everything. You'd first open up the top latch. Just lift up, use your little thumb thing here, lift up the lever, get it out of the way, and then you have to release the bottom latch. Then you go over here on the passenger side, you have this lever, you have to pull up the lever and then start swinging it out. It's going to hit its first notch with this amount of opening. If you want to open it up more, then you have to lift up the lever and go a little bit further. Now this is at the fully open position for the passenger side swing out. Same thing for the driver's side swing out. You have to operate the lever and then open it up. If you want to open it up more, release the mechanism and open it up further. So now both swing outs are open to the furthest most setting. If you were stopped somewhere and you wanted to take a break and utilize your tray table to cook some lunch or maybe make some coffee, you take off the wing nut and just fold it down. Now you have a nice working surface. If you wanted even more room to work, you could lift up your hatch. You can slide out this tray that the 5th gen 4runners have. And now you even have more room to set up lunch or whatever you're doing. It's kind of a cool setup with the tray table and with this tray that slides out on the 5th gen 4runners. To close everything up, just close your hatch, put your tray table back up with your wing nut. You first close your driver's side swing arm, you release the mechanism. If you let go of the pin right away, then it might get stuck in that first position right here. So if you're going to close it, just keep holding the pin till you get about to this spot, and then you can close it all the way. Then you do the same with the passenger side. You release the mechanism, you bring it into about this point where it's past the other hole, and then just bring it all the way against the other one. Reversing the order, I'm going to get the bottom latch hooked in first, and then I'm going to swing the top latch in, and then lock that one down. Now you can see that this thing is really sturdy. It's not going anywhere, so it's not going to be rattling around when he's on the trail. All right, we're finally all done with this job. The one thing that we didn't show you yet is relocating the backup camera to the swing arm. That camera relocation is fairly involved, and it took quite a bit to film it, so we're going to make it as its own separate video. If you click on the link above, you can see that video. As you saw, getting the swing arms onto the bumper and getting all the associated brackets and everything else onto the swing arms is fairly time consuming. There's a lot of little fasteners you got to deal with. You have to paint some parts that don't come painted. You have to wire your license plate light, and all that takes quite a bit of time. So don't be surprised if this ends up being an all-day install for you. Just like the first video, I'd have to say I'm pretty impressed with the C4 product. They put a lot of thoughtful things into their design. It seems very well built, very strong, and I think it's going to be a very functional bumper for Garrett and for any other 5th gen owner who decides to purchase one. With all that said, we thank you for watching Toyota Time with Timmy the Toolman and Sean, and special returning guest Garrett. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. If you have any questions or comments, do that below. Take care. Bye-bye. Sick mods and sick bumpers.